Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to do an iPhone 7 Plus charge port replacement. Starting off, we're going to remove the lock screws. And then remove the screen. Pop this under the bottom left corner for best results. Slice along the edge. Don't go too deep, or else you'll cut some cables. Pop it up. Pry it open. Grab your Y bit. Let's get these screws out of here. First things first, we'll disconnect the battery by removing this plate. Follow the battery cable and disconnect the battery. After disconnecting the battery, go ahead and unplug the LCD and home button. Moving on to the front camera cable, we'll take off that protective plate. Remove the plate and disconnect that cable. Go ahead and remove the screen, set it off to the side. Won't need it until the end. Let's go ahead and grab our Phillips head screwdriver. Start taking off some more plates. We need to remove the motherboard in order to change out the charge port, as the charge port runs underneath the motherboard. Don't forget to keep your diagrams straight so that way you're not missing any screws. When you put the device back together. Alright, now that we have all of the plates removed that are necessary, we'll go ahead and disconnect these two antenna cables. We'll get our standoff screwdriver remover. As I said, we're continuing on to remove any and all standoff screws. Don't forget to also remove the SIM card tray. While you can use thin tweezers, it is preferable to use a SIM card popping tool like so to remove the SIM card tray. Alright, after removing any and all standoff screws, we can go ahead and begin disconnecting any and all cables connected to the motherboard. So that way we don't tear anything during the charge port replacement. Okay, after all cables are removed, gently lift the motherboard. Make sure nothing's holding it down, keeping it attached too hard. And then you can go ahead and set this motherboard off to the side. With that done, we'll go ahead and remove the loudspeaker. Back to using our Phillips head screwdriver again. Gently lift. Separate this particular cable that is connected to the charge port and move the loudspeaker off to the side. Moving on to the Taptic engine, let's go ahead and get those screws removed. Now be careful not to just go ahead and lift the Taptic engine out, as you will tear its connector cable. First remove this protective plate. Just lift that away. And then disconnect the Taptic engine from the charge port. Let's go ahead and remove that and get that out of the way as well. All right, so on from there, we're going to remove the 7 charge port screws that are holding it down, starting with this one on the corner. Don't forget these screws down here. We'll have to do a little bit of angling, but we'll get it right out. Now, for the most part, if you're doing a charge port replacement, you can just peel this out. Some people like to use heat. This one's coming up a little bit easier than I expected, so we're just going to peel this out. Now that we've got that done, let's go ahead and get rid of the adhesive here and here with our screwdriver. Make it a little bit easier on ourselves. And just lift this up and away. And there is our old charge port. Now we've got our brand new charge port. I'm gonna go ahead and peel off all these adhesive protectors. Throw those away. Now, one thing you might notice are these 2 very tiny white dots here and here. We will line them up with these holes here and here to ensure that the device is perfectly aligned. Take those, line them up, make sure the white holes are showing. There they are. Peel them down, make sure that this charge port is pushed in properly. And lined up. Now, where were we? Yes. So continuing on, we make sure that the charge port is properly aligned. Every screw hole matches up, so that way whenever we put the motherboard in, we're able to easily connect the charge port cable. Okay, and now moving on to reassembly. Let's put it back together. To do that, we'll just do the same process in reverse. Ensure that all 7 charge port screws are firmly back in place, so that way there's no issue with it coming loose. Put our Taptic engine back in, line it up so that it's good and proper. Plug it back into our charge port. Replace the protective cover. Again, this is mostly with the Phillips head screwdriver, so you won't have to switch too much. It really only takes 4 tools to do. But do make sure you use the proper tool for the proper job. Got that firmly back in place. Let's go ahead and put our loudspeaker back in. Make sure that when you do this, you line these cables back up. There we are. Press that firmly in there. Again, make sure that that loudspeaker is good and tight on there, or else it won't make a proper connection to the motherboard. Okay. Now we'll go ahead and slide that motherboard back in. Careful not to mess with any of the wires. Slide it back into place. First thing I like to do is go ahead and reconnect that charging cable, as it is much easier to do before you tighten the motherboard down. It will not hurt the device to go ahead and plug that in, as it is not connected to power. Let's go ahead and get these two antenna cables up and back into their original orientation. Moving back to our standoff screwdrivers after one last Phillips head to hold the motherboard in place. That goes right here. Let's go ahead and switch hands, get you a better view of that. And let's begin putting our standoff screws back in. Go ahead, lift this tiny little tab. Careful not to tear it. Alright, and we can start plugging everything back in up here in the camera area. Make sure those are all good and pressed down. Want good tight connections. Okay, now that everything's plugged back in, minus the battery, don't want to plug that in and blow a backlight filter. Go ahead and put our SIM card tray back in. Okay, now let's go ahead and begin putting all of these plates back together. Again, switching back to the Phillips head screwdriver for the most part, all the way up until we put the screen back on. If you have any questions about the repair, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. And we are almost ready to close this device. We'll go ahead and put that screen back on. Make sure the LCD flex, home button flex, and front camera flex are firmly seated. Let's go ahead and put that front camera flex plate down. Switching back to the Y bit. Last but not least, let's go ahead and put that battery cable down since we have all other cables firmly in position. Put this last protective plate on here. Close it up. Start at the edges, push towards the center. Leaves a good, clean press into it. Put the lock screws back into the device. Let's go ahead and see if the repair was successful. And another successful repair. As always, have a good day. Feel free to leave a like and a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want more content.